Hello and welcome to the Sweaty Dive Podcast, the podcast in which I, Buff Charmander, joined as always by my co-host KG,
Yo.
take a deep dive or a sweaty dive into a film each month. This month we are talking about Netflix's film Hustle, which premiered on June 8th, starring Adam Sandler as an NBA, not coach, but an NBA scout who finds a new possible superstar in an unlikely place. Is this our first Netflix movie that we're talking about?
Possibly. I gotta think in the recesses of my brain here. I think so.
Yeah, I feel like it's not our first streaming thing that we're talking about, though, right? We must have talked about something streaming before. Or actually, maybe not. This might be our first streamer.
Could be a first for many things today.
Yeah, pretty cool. I'm actually, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit later. Now that I'm thinking about that, actually, you know what? Let's just talk about this now. You and I are such big theater release guys. What is going to entice you to check out a new streaming movie? What does it need to have?
Oh, that's the age-old billion-dollar question. If I'm being completely honest, the reason I put this movie on was because I was a little bored after work, and I like when Adam Sandler takes on more serious roles. I'm sure we'll have that discussion a little later.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility to the film. I don't think I would rush out to theaters to see this personally, just because it kind of seemed like I don't know, a lot of Adam Sandler Netflix films are kind of butt, if we're just being frank. He gets his bread, he treats his people right, all his friends get paid, they go on vacation, super jealous, love the energy, but they're just not the best. So for a hot second, I thought this could have been a very overdone drama and borderline corny, possibly making fun of the whole idea from the small trailer that I saw. But once I got 10 minutes in, I texted you and I was like, I genuinely love this film. I think this is really good. And it took me another day to finish. I had stuff to do, but it was also nice that I can just kind of put it down, take a break, get back to it. And it wasn't something that was super heavy and weighty or something I had to really think about, but it was just a nice hour 52 enjoyment. It was just a really good story. It was just it was very accessible. This is the best way I can describe it.
So I'm kind of glad you mentioned the whole weighty thing. I don't know if it's just a me thing or if anyone out there can relate, or even if you can. I actually struggle with new streaming releases when it's really heavy dramatic stuff. When it's not something that's kind of lighter or something that isn't as I do well with weighty movies when I can lock in a movie theater. When I'm in the chaos that is real life at a house, at someone else's house, watching with friends, when there's a bunch of distractions around, that's when I get a little bit squirrely. I don't know.
You said it so perfectly, because I actually thought about that a week ago. I was on my computer looking for a movie, and in my brain I always say, on my computer I have to watch action movies. I can't watch anything else unless it's even a Apple TV's Plus drama or something. I want that on a big screen because I want to take in the episode, I want to feel it, I want to get locked in. But if I'm just going one earbud, or I'm trying to make something, or I'm trying to get something done, the action movie is the way to go. You don't have to be locked in the whole time. You can you don't have to hit pause. You can run, go do something, come back. But I think you said it perfectly. You don't have to lock in 100% in order to really take it all in and grasp it.
Yeah, and there's for me, when it comes to watching anything at home, I think everyone out there who watches stuff, TV, movies, in terms of streaming or even on live television, if you watch television anymore, we're all looking for that hook, right? What's going to make me not click off this and go to the next thing? What's going to make me not change the channel? You and I think you agree with me on this. Do you have the 3-episode rule for TV shows as well?
Yeah. And sometimes if I'm feeling very forgiving, with first season of True Detective, I pushed it to 4, and it's now one of my favorite shows of all time.
There we go. And
I don't know what's going on. By the end of 4, I was like, everybody needs to watch this today.
And what we mean by the 3-episode rule is, I think I got this from John Campea actually. I will wait 3 episodes to decide whether or not I'm going to finish a show. because after 3 episodes, you can even on like a slow burn show, you can kind of start to see some of like the meat on the bone, as it were. You even something like I mean, you and I really like this show, but we're not going to touch on it too much because I refuse. Obi-Wan Kenobi, by episode 3, you're don't laugh. You really you get what's going on.
Some of us do. That's all.
And with this movie, much like yourself, it's so funny. I didn't realize that you had texted me at the 10-minute mark because I texted you at the 10-minute mark because we were deciding what to do this month, and you had texted me like, hey, have you watched this movie? It's really good. And I was like, oh, I'll give it a watch. I was watching it in my room, and like at this certain point, I forget what point of the movie it was, but I was like, oh, there it is. I'm in. Let's do this. All right, full send. And much like yourself, I was I am always excited to see Adam Sandler in particular do more weighty stuff because I think he has a capacity for it. He just doesn't. I don't know if it's they don't secure the bag enough. Maybe that's why he's not doing it. And which, fair play. I'm not going to judge ever for anyone securing a bag, but I was excited, but I didn't realize that the movie was good until you had said something. Had you seen like reviews or heard like word of mouth that it was good?
No, I think I saw like a second trailer, and the second trailer looked a little more promising. Like the first little teaser one, like under a minute, I was like, this kind of looks like a ball of corn. This, like, I don't know if this is just like a quick cash grab for him. But then the second trailer that was more detailed, and it showed him like giving a speech to, I think the actor, actual players, Hernan Gomez, if I'm
Yeah, Juancho Hernan Gomez.
he's great in the film. I really think he does a great job. I'm going to get into him a little bit later, but he's giving him like a heartfelt speech. Like, you got to bleed for this. You got to love this sport more than like you love yourself or your family. And I was like, wow, all right. Adam seems like he's very into this. And I know he likes basketball. Like, he's very passionate about it. So, like I said, just got home after work. I was like, all my shows I'm caught up on. This seems like an easy watch. I'll put it on. If it sucks, like I just walk out. I don't care. And 10 minutes in, I was like, God damn, I got to finish this film. This is good. This is a good time.
Can I give you a moment that I was like, "Oh, this is so cool" about the movie? So like, Adam Sandler used to be a guy who you saw in movies, and he always had very attractive significant others in these movies, right? But at the times when he was doing that, he was like he looked like an average, moderately attractive dude, right? Whereas now he does this thing where he like purposefully looks disheveled. I think like that. I think that's his look. Big beard, no real anything going on with the hair, baggy clothes, and you see him in this movie with Queen Latifah, and it's just like this man's still doing it. It doesn't matter how he looks, he's still doing it. This was the least believable visual relationship I've ever seen in an Adam Sandler movie, aside from Uncut Gems. But I just loved it. Yeah, that's number 1 with a bullet. That was just something that I was like, wow, that he will never stop like overshooting. He will always go a tier above where he's at. So shout out the Sandman for doing that. And Queen Latifah, pretty good in this movie. Just realized we don't really get much Queen Latifah anymore, and I'd kind of like to see some more of her.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say like it's kind of weird. I felt like they were almost like better friends than married in a sense, but I don't think she was bad in it. And I think their whole family dynamic was nice. Like another reason I actually checked this movie out beyond that, beyond just like putting it on was I put on the Big Pick shout out Sean Fantasy. I was listening to his hustle like breakdown a little bit, and I didn't want to get any like too many spoilers from it, but he was just talking about how like he loves playing a father. Same, Adam Sandler really likes being a dad, and I didn't really think about that till I thought back to all of his movies and how like genuine he is as like a father in these films. And I was curious to see like how he did it in this movie, and he's just super like believable. He's very, I would say like no matter what movie he does, even if they're like super stupid, like just embarrassingly waste of time stupid, I feel like he's just buying in. And it's like if it fails, we just move on. And I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to sit on it, but I'm going to give it a good like I'm going to do an honest like effort at each thing. So when he's being charismatic to his family or to the basketball player, I buy it, and I like really respect his craft of putting in that full effort for every scene he's in, and I just feel like he really like does it. This isn't his best work, but I think in his recent years, this is one of more of his like. I feel you love this film and you want it to be good performances.
You know something? It's funny you mentioned that. Our friend the Ginger Gorilla and I, for those of you who don't know, I have a TV podcast as well that I do with a good friend of ours, the Ginger Gorilla. It's called Gorilla and the Geek. Go check that out. On our recent pod, we talked about this show called The Circle, and we talked about that show is on its fourth season, and we talked about why we love the first season so much, and the reason for that I believe why the first season's so special, aside from like the cast being great, is there is a rawness and an a unique authenticity to it. And when you were talking about Sandler just now, it kind of hit me that with every single performance of his, aside from like Jack and Jill, he he kind of brings that just naturally. It's I don't even know if I would categorize that as charisma or if it's just kind of his essence as a person. He just has this believability to him that even if I'm not really enjoying the movie, I'm like, well, it's still the Sandman doing the Sandman.
Seems like a guy that always wants to like support other people. Okay, and it shows in his work because all of his movies are still all of his friends, and whether they're like laughably bad or this is horribly bad, he still makes sure to get all of them in there, make sure they get their little bag so he can get his mega bag. But I think that's very genuine of him to like do that constantly, and he doesn't forget all those people that he grew up with. I think that's really cool.
And I think he something cool that I've seen at least in interviews is when he is working. I mean, I think everyone by now, if you've kept up with him at all, you know that he has a genuine love for basketball, and according to this movie, a genuine disdain for soccer or football to any of our European listenership out there. But he shows like a large amount of respect to any athletes who are working with him on any film. You hear stories about the way he talks to people. Like apparently he was very very kind and very encouraging of Anthony Edwards in this movie, who I must discuss by the way later on, because my goodness, what a star-making performance that was. Do you, and I guess we're already talking about him. Is this? And I'm not going to ask you to rank them, but let's say in terms of the tiers, is this like a top tier or maybe like a second tier Sandler performance for you?
Personally, I would say yes. I mean, like the classics like Mr. Deeds and Billy Madison, like those are A plus plus. Like you're never gonna repeat that pot like just lightning in a bottle again. But in terms of his more serious roles and things of that nature, I really liked it. I thought again it was genuine. He was believable. I felt bad for his character when he was downtrodden, when he was pissed. I felt it. I was kind of pissed for him. I hated the son of Robert Duvall's character. His name escapes me at this moment. It was
Are
Vince
you talking?
Merrick, I believe his
Yeah,
name,
yeah.
played by Ben
Played by
Foster.
yes.
I don't know if he was wearing a bald cap. It was very eye like it messed with my eyes. I don't know if he shaved his head. I think he was just trying to match Robert Duvall, but anyway, I digress. I, I would say of all of his roles, this to me, although not his best movie, him personally, I think he did a very good job in it. And I would recommend it to people just on like, have you never seen him be serious? Try this out. Maybe Uncut Gems will be too stressful, but here you can believe him like he has some comedy, but you also see him struggling and you see his anger. Like one of my favorite scenes is when I think it's when he quits. He leaves the Sixers and he kind of lies about it, but he looks like he's going to cry when he yells at him. And he knows that he's basically throwing away all of what he worked for, but he's so done being just tossed to the side and being treated second tier when he's done so much. He Sandler does a very good job of awkward, uncomfortable facial expressions. And I feel like a lot of other actors kind of force that where, like you mentioned before, that might just be him as a person. When he's upset, he's just kind of being him. And he's just thinking like, if someone treated me this way, how would I do it? He doesn't overdo it. It's just like, wow, like he did that. I can't believe he did that. I'm so jealous. I can't do that, and I'm sure I would have broke down way worse than this guy. But I'd say overall, yeah, definitely up there in his filmography for me.
Yeah, you mentioned Uncut Gems. To me, I think he wasn't nominated for an Oscar for that, right? I don't think he got nominated.
No, I think it was like the farthest he went was the Globes, maybe.
To me, I think that's pretty wild. Just me. I think that's his best performance, and I thought that was one of the better performances by a male lead all year that year. The issue with that movie is that it came out in 2019, which I would argue is a top 3 year in cinema ever. So that movie comes out in 2020, and it's probably not even a debate whether or not he's getting nominated, or even 2021 for that matter. Heck, he'd probably be in the running for this year. Although this year's starting to shape up to be something pretty special too. We might be talking about some stuff at the end of the year. Um, but yeah, I would agree with you. I think that this is one of the ones where it's like, okay, if you don't have faith in Adam Sandler as an actor right now or anymore, go watch Hustle. He's he's real, and I think he does a real service to a job that no one really talks about in sports, which is scouting, and how actually kind of hard those guys' lives are. He said that he missed like 8 birthdays in a row of his daughters or something. And I was listening to an interview with Kenny Smith, who plays, what was his friend's name?
Leon.
Leon. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Leon Rich. Kenny Smith said in an interview with Colin Cowherd, if you want to check it out, people were asking him like, "Is that what the lives of scouts are actually like?" And he said, "Yeah." Kenny Smith said the movie's probably like 90 to 95% accurate as to like how it portrays like league jobs, relationships within the league, how important it is to have certain connections and have be in good standing with certain people, how frustrating it is can have to have a really bad owner, especially one who works. There's in basketball, unfortunately, there's like this weird thing where it's like if you're into stats, you're just a nerd. You have to go with the eye test, or there's no like balance with it, so it tends to be very like how it was portrayed in the movie. It was like Sandler was the eye test guy with using analytics as well to help, but the owner, who would then become the co-owner, in Vince, was strictly analytics, and he was making bad choices because of it, right? So I think that it was really cool to just kind of see the inter the interconnected stuff of like what life is like for these guys. Now, of course, no one's going to Spain and finding a construction worker who is league ready. That's obviously overdramatic, but no, you never know. You're right. You're right. It's possible, but my brother was wearing Tim's. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worn Tim's.
And on the Tims to show you just how good he was.
Yeah, it really lets you know. Yeah, and small shout out. I didn't notice a filter when they were in Spain. Like how a lot of times in
Oh, you
media.
mean like mustard yellow? Yellow
Yeah,
mustard.
I hate that. It pisses me off. So shout out them for using the same filter throughout the entire movie, which is really nice. Did you? I mean, you're not a big NBA guy. You're more of an NFL kind of guy. How did you feel watching this type of stuff? Was it eye opening to you, or were you kind of like, oh, okay, I guess so?
Great question, actually, because in terms of basketball and baseball, baseball is one of the sports I hate the most. I genuinely don't care for it. It makes you fall asleep. I will go to a game to have a few brewskis and hang out with my friends, but I will never watch it. And I'm terrible at it. Can't play it. Won't play it. But I love the movie Moneyball. And the reason I love that film is because number one, Brad Pitt, A1, Jonah Hill, fantastic. But I love the background of sports. How does someone get from point A to point B? What is the drama in terms of a draft or analyzing players or building a team, deconstructing a team? I love that stuff. I think it's way more interesting than like seeing a team itself. Like the Jordan documentary, we did an 8-part breakdown, right? I don't watch basketball avidly, but I love the stories. One of my favorite shows of the year was the Lakers show on HBO. I thought for as much turmoil that show caused with who was upset about what betrayal, I thought they told that story in the most interesting way possible for someone who does not watch and follow sports. And I was on the edge of my seat, like, will Magic win? I don't know because I didn't research. I didn't follow any of this. But one of the reasons I like this movie a lot is because it shows you that background of like what is life like for someone on the road constantly? All he does is eat what he knows: fast food, KFC, McDonald's. They make jokes to it. It's clearly not a healthy lifestyle. He may not live much longer if he like has that kind of life with all that stress. But I just really like seeing the ups and downs and the in and outs of organizations, and I bet that's real in terms of like how you brought up before. People are comparing eye tests versus analytics, and think of how many players either go to the wrong team or are missed opportunities or straight up don't go anywhere because one guy was like, well, he wore the wrong shoes this day, or he only had 36% of his threes, not 35% of his threes. And it's like, but you were not with that kid this whole time. And I think they do a good job of building their relationship throughout the film in order to sell you on the entirety of the story.
I would agree. Did I will say though, it's weird. Like, I'm aware of certain GMs and certain ownerships and stuff like that. So the Sixers GM is Daryl Morey, who is very much well known for being like one of the forefathers of the analytics movement in the NBA. So part of me was kind of like, are they taking some jabs at their own GM? That's interesting, because the Sixers had to sign off on this being in there, and then another part of me was like, was Daryl in on the joke? Did he think that was funny? And in which case, that's really cool that he was like, all right, yeah, go for it, because the guy even the owner even mentions that he made the wrong draft pick. He drafted the guy who was also an NBA player. I don't know if you knew that. He is a Magic player, and I'm blanking on his name. Franz Wagner, was it? I think it was Franz.
You know better than me.
Hold on, give me 1 second. I can tell you right now.
Was it Mo? The guy's name is as Haas, Mo Wagner.
Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner. Thank you. Yes, it was Mo Wagner. Yes, yes, yes. Was not Franz Wagner. Yeah, correct. There's a lot of there's so many European names in the NBA. Sometimes like someone can go from like Jokic to Djokovic, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a little. Yeah, exactly. I'm getting like head spun here. But he even made that joke, like he trusted the analytics and drafted a guy who, like, statistically speaking, seems like he should be a perfect fit, but wasn't a hard worker, didn't do X, Y, and Z. And this is stuff that, like, I'm an avid NBA guy, kind of sweaty NBA guy, and this is stuff that I hear now daily leading up to the draft that's in a couple weeks. So it's like, oh, it's cool to hear. And you know something, I'm not a huge NFL guy. I'm like a postseason watcher. I'm one of those like all right, who's playing now? All right, what storyline can I lock into? All right, cool, I'm locked in. Yeah, this year, this upcoming season, I will be firmly rooting for the Bills because of Joshua
Allen.
Joshua Allen, yes.
Just Josh. That's okay.
Okay, just Josh. He played the most entertaining game I've ever seen in my life during the playoffs last year against Pat Mahomes. So now I'm like, all right, I want you to win because you did cool stuff. Last year, I was all in on the Rams because I was like, what's that quarterback's name?
Matt Stafford.
Matt Stafford played for Detroit. Yeah, I know, right? The Detroit Lions. That was a massive meme when we were like in 8th grade about how terrible they were. And I was like, I'm rooting for this guy. Plus Odell's on that team. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, let's go. So I was rooting for them. So now I'm keyed in here. I wouldn't mind a movie based on the NFL process like this. We had that one Eagles movie with
They have one. It's called Draft Day. It's just a little cornier than this. It came out several years ago. Chadwick Boseman was actually one of the actors in it before he got Black Panther. Kevin Costner plays the GM of the Browns, and it's like leading up to the draft. It's kind of like a worse version of Moneyball, but it's an easy watch. It's something you can just put on, watch it, have a good time with it, you know. But if you like this, and I would recommend this to anybody, if you like the movie Hustle, if you like Moneyball, I would check out Draft Day. It's nothing like it's not going to win any awards, but it is interesting to see the background and of like that process and how it goes and how stressful it can get that day of, because some of these picks aren't traded till like you're up.
I didn't mention this off the top of the pod, but we do get into pretty big spoilers on this podcast. We want to talk entirely about the movie. We haven't talked really any spoilers up until this point, so from here on out, I want you to have either watched the movie or not care about spoilers at all going forward. So the story of Bo Cruz, who is Stanley's recruit from Spain, he finds him hustling, and there is the title, of course, in the courts of Spain. Goes from playing a game of, I think it was fours or fives. It was definitely full court, to a game of one-on-one with a guy who was, of course, being too brash. What I thought was really cool about it is that they positioned Bo as a defensive player, and that was like his big strong suit. And I thought that was so cool because I feel like with a lot of films or TV shows, a lot of times they highlight the more highlight worthy stuff within these sports, which is the offense.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the defense part because now the more I think about it, I think it's positioned well because he's a very defensive human being, if that makes sense. Like he's defensive for his family, he's defensive in the way he talks to people and introduces himself and holds himself, and he is always kind of like second guessing himself, right? You actually brought this point up, so don't be giving me all that credit here. But I think that I'm hoping that they like this is how they wrote it, because if not, they did a great job of accidentally writing this. But by you bringing that up, it made me think about all the times he was second guessing himself or thinking about his daughter or his family and why he didn't do certain things. It goes with his character that he's so like selfless and he's trying to help others. And a lot of his highlight plays are him. I also noticed when he like passed the ball, because he makes his threes or whatever, but like when things are getting going and he's communicating, I like that he was able to seamlessly like transition. And I was kind of thinking like he played the 4-on-4s like very unorganized. He did a lot of one-on-one throughout the movie, so I was curious how he would transition. Now, obviously, movie magic, he just becomes miraculously better. I would assume that would take much practice to go from ones to threes to fives. Like you can't just go one-on-one now. You're like, okay, I'm ready, full court, organized team sport, let's go. Like that's pretty hard. But I love your point about them highlighting his defense.
Sweaty Dive Incorporated might have to send KG a PED because that was pretty incredible. A PED test. We might have to test you. That was a heater. That was an all timer. That was awesome. Jeez Louise, I have goose pimples. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you though. And yeah, well, you mentioned that. That's pretty interesting that you mentioned that. Oddly, a lot of training, like a lot of modern training, is about like skill improvement, and a lot of that is based on like one-on-one workouts, and a lot of like older players or older media members. I know Bill Simmons has talked about this kind of. The game is a little bit more different now because people train in a more one-on-one setting, and a lot of it's meant to improve your singular chance of making it onto a team. That's what a lot of this is. It's like, all right, we got to make sure that you're able to do these things or whatever. What you would imagine is with him is that he's such a good defensive player that you just kind of let him be a hawk out there, and then just kind of tell him to do these specific things on offense until he like grows or whatever. And that'd be the story of Bo. I mean, Stanley said that he could be a top 10 guy at one point, and it's like being a top 10 NBA player is like the hardest job in the world.
Kind of threw that around a little bit. It's like, well, let's see him play with four other guys.
You mentioned it already. Juancho Hernan-Gomez is awesome in this movie. For an athlete, this has got to be up there with like any. You ever watch He Got Game? Okay, so that is usually heralded as the all-time basketball player performance in a movie. It's Ray Allen playing a guy named Jesus Shuttlesworth. And he's really good, but he's also bouncing off of Denzel Washington. So there's a yeah. So when your leader is like in the conversation for best actor ever, I think it kind of relaxes you a little bit in terms of having to carry a movie. You're kind of like, no, I would go into being like, no, he's carrying it. I just have to do my part. And then I would feel more confident in it. Whereas Juancho, I mean, Adam Sandler's a legend, but he's not a dramatic acting legend. So I think that he does a really good job, and this is gonna sound odd, but I wonder if him having an accent and learning English, I would assume as a second language. I assume, I'm not entirely certain. Um, I wonder if that helped him sound more authentic.
Was just gonna say that, man. It's like we're on the same way with this one. I'm curious if he took his own experience because he's from. Does he play on the Spain national team?
I don't know if he plays on the Spain national team right now. He is currently on the Jazz. He is from Madrid. Yes.
But he European player drafted. So I'm curious if he took his experience and then like when they wrote the movie and Sandler talked with him, I'm curious if he just like take what you had to go through and put it to the character. Like don't overthink it. Just try to articulate how you experienced your first few weeks in the United States away from your family, what you were thinking and feeling. Now obviously things are dramatized. I don't know his family life if it's like the character at all. But to be in this brand new world with only one person supporting you, I agree that the accent and like the subtle amount of dialogue helps because he's probably not an Oscar winning actor, but I think a smart director can take an actor with like subtle skills and highlight them well to make them like a top tier actor or actress. You know what I mean? If you give someone too much material, they have a lot of ability to expose themselves for how bad they are in a role. But if you limit their playtime, you make him a key role player, he's just a very physical presence. Let him do what he does best. Let him just play. And I don't know if you noticed this. There are two very long training montages in this film, like to the point where I was like, I started laughing because I was like out loud belly laughing. I was like, I love this, but this is insane. These are each at least 8 to 9 minutes long. But I loved it because it was good basketball. Rosillo, again, my pod god, he pointed out on the rewatchables countless times that there should be somebody on film sets paid millions of dollars to make sure everybody who's playing a sport does it right. Most scenes look terrible. People can't throw footballs. Their basketball shots are trash. Like in Stranger Things, semi spoilers. When they play basketball, it's the worst shit I've ever seen. And I'm horrible at basketball. But like, what are we doing? You're gonna crowd him there. You have all this space. What kind of jump shot? It's like somebody said throw the ball, they cut it, then they had somebody over the net just drop it in. It was just ugly. But I think this movie does a very good job of showing the different drills that he probably has done and just allowing these players to play and not having crazy cuts. You're basically getting a firsthand look at like an intense practice, which is probably more intense than the games.
That's kind of something you notice is missing from like fight sports movies, is that it doesn't necessarily feel like real fighting. This movie felt like real basketball was being played, real modern basketball at least. And that's because NBA players were actually out there playing. This is like the most NBA cameos I've seen since Space Jam 1.
I would agree that this is like a lot of famous players in a role. And I think the majority are like good. I think Kenny Smith is good as his friend. And again, Anthony Edwards. Should we just talk about him now?
Can we please? He plays Kermit Wiltz, who is it's funny, he was the number one pick in his draft, but he was playing a guy who was at least going number two, but wasn't satisfied with that, so went to workouts to try and make sure.
That was like a 2K storyline.
Yeah.
Like your arch enemy is slated to be number two, but he's going to be at every single workout to be number one and to piss you off. And you're not even like top five. You're like a nobody, but he's your rival now.
Yep. So good. And Anthony Edwards is famous for being, I mean, probably the funniest guy in the NBA, while also being like, could this guy be like one of the 10 best players in the league one day type of guy? It's like a rare combination that we haven't seen since, like, this is going to sound crazy, but it's like a Shaquille O'Neal situation where it's like your personality matches your skill level. That's awesome. It's just that he's a better actor than Shaq was. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, he is phenomenal, and like really easily, he's one of the most likable guys in the league. He's really unlikable in this movie. He does a great job at it. When he mentions Bo's daughter, I was like, don't you dare. Don't you do it.
It's like he wanted to say this for a while, so I hope afterwards they hugged it out. It was flowing out of it. It was it was like he was born to be a villain. He did a
Hmm.
very good job of being like the dirtbag ex opponent, whatever.
I could see him being the first NBA guy to try and be an action star one day. And like it works. Like, okay, he's big, he's massive, he's like the 6'6", 220-pound dude who was apparently like capable of going to the NFL as well, which is pretty interesting. Um, he could be the first guy you could see going from basketball to movies. Have we seen any athletes transition like to that? No, right?
80s and the 90s, a lot of like quarterbacks, wide receivers, they did like B-level movies.
Well, there was Dan Marino in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective playing himself.
You are correct. I'm sure I can't off the top of my head think of one that made like a big leap. Um, I mean, Ronald Reagan was an actor and then he became the president. So
That's actually a really good point. A fun fact: Dan Marino, up until I was like 14 years old, was the only NFL player I ever knew existed because of that movie.
you're like Miami Dolphins. What a team!
Yeah, yeah. And then I was always like, "Oh, it was Ray Finkel? Did he actually exist? Was that like factually correct at all? I don't know." Were you shocked to see an athlete? Actually, were you shocked to see two current players, both under the age of 30, being pretty solid in like a good movie? They weren't solid in like a bad movie. They were solid in a good movie.
Athletes are bad actors. And
Yeah.
that's not their fault. Like they're just freaks of nature that are really good at a sport. Like they can't all be amazing. It's just not. It's not in the cards. It's okay. You can't be perfect at everything. But I think these two actors do a very good job and they play off of each other very well. I'm sure it had to get heated on set at certain points. I did hear that the basketball scenes in particular, if they yelled cut, they would go for like one more point, which I love. You could feel it when they play. But I think they both do a really good job of playing off one another. Towards the end, Kermit gets like a little cartoon villainish for me, but that's like what's supposed to happen. It's Hernan Gomez's film. It's his arc. Like that's what we're building towards. But I think they both did a really good job. Again, I think Kenny Smith was really good. There was another. Oh, I love Julius Irvin, by the way. Dr. J coming in for the freaking dunks. Like it's so stupid. But I was like, yeah, like yeah, just let him do his thing. This is great. I'm sure he loved it. I'm curious if that video of him dunking was real. Is that? Do you know?
The original one that they showed.
Yeah, is that real?
Oh, yeah, that was real, and that went viral because that was part of his. That was part of his documentary about like his life, and the documentary. That's the last shot of the documentary is him dunking still at like he was like 60 something at that point, and we were all like, "What?"
Afterwards,
I don't know, but that was like crazy. He's also. I don't think this is like. I don't think this is unfair to say. He's one of the most athletic humans ever. Like legitimately, he was like Michael Jordan has said that Dr. J is who he like studied as a kid because he was the one who was able to like fly. You see his you go back and watch the way he was leaping now in Converse, and you're like, imagine the dude had New Balance or something.
outrageous.
In the past, let's go 10 years. In the past 10 years, I personally would say Hustle is one of the better sports movies that we've had in recent memory. Would you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that statement. Just thinking off of the.
I wouldn't say the best. Like, I would probably make an argument that Creed 1 might be the best sports movie we've had in the past decade. I would probably say that. But that's also like a legacy film with a lot of emotion behind it. An actor at his peak.
So, did you see The Way Back, the Ben Affleck?
I still need to watch that movie.
All right, so number one is very good. I won't spoil anything, but I would categorize that as a drama first with like the use of sports and basketball to accentuate the story. Or I think this is more of like a Remember the Titans. This is a like a Moneyball. This is like a sports movie. So although they're both great, they're different animals completely. You watch one way, you watch one another way. You know what I mean? Like I would, as weird as it sounds, like I hold The Way Back to a higher standard because that's to me more of like a, what was the word we used? Like cinema, you know, if you want to get real pinky out fancy, because it's like it's really trying to tell this heavy weighted dramatic story with the undertones of sports like flourished in, where like something like I like Warrior a lot because it reminds me of Hustle, where it's mainly a sports film. The sports are done really well, but there's also a story that you can attach to. So it's kind of like sports first with undertone to drama, where the way back and other films related are kind of like drama first with undertones of sports.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's fun. I was actually going to bring up Warrior at some point in this pod too as like a one of the good modern sports movies. And I said decade specifically because that's 2011, and that's just 1 year outside of the decade mark for where we're at right now. Because if that was included, that would be number one in my opinion. That movie's awesome. I love that film. Um, I don't know if you're prepared to say this, but do you know what makes a good sports movie for you personally?
Well, number one, I'm a sucker for underdogs. I like a downtrodden hero. One of my favorite sports movies is Cinderella Man. If you've ever seen that, uh, for those that haven't seen it, it's a movie inspired by a true story of a boxer in the 1940s. He lost everything. He was a famous boxer. He lost all of his money. His family had to live in like a one room apartment with no water or electricity, and he basically had to do whatever to help his family. And then it was kind of like his rise back in fighting and how his fighting like helped his family and his community and everything. So when it comes to sports movies, I'm a big sucker for that underdog story when it's told well. I can buy into some of the corniness. I do want my lead actor to like be believable, and I think again we've said it before, but I really think Hernan Gomez does a good job, especially in that scene when he talks about his assault charge. They finally get him to express what happened. I felt terrible. I was like, yeah, you should kick that guy's ass. He wants your daughter so he can get more money. Like he doesn't even want her as a person. He wants her as an object. Like, and he doesn't even finish his story, but you know how it ends, you know? And he does a good job of just letting his emotion explain like how he's remorseful for what he did, but he's not like sorry. You know what I mean? Like that guy deserved it, but he's sorry he put his family in that situation and things of that nature. And I like a strong ending. Like if it's gonna be a happy ending, it could be a happy ending. I'm fine with that. And sometimes if it's not the happiest of endings, like I just want it all to wrap up. I like a concise story. Some sports movies are a little cornier than others, but those are like the big things I look for in a sports movie. And I'm a sucker for a speech. Any Given Sunday. Have you ever seen that? Al Pacino.
This might be a hot take. I almost require a happy ending in a sports movie. I do not like. Oh, what was that movie? Another boxing movie. I don't want to spoil it. It was with the woman who was trained.
$1 Million Baby.
$1 Million Baby. Yeah, there's a spoiler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Great film, but like when I go, like, would you? That movie to
That
me,
was just Clint being Clint.
yeah, but it's great. It really is. But tell me if I'm wrong. That movie pivots at 75% of the way through the film. It pivots from being a sports movie to a drama including sports.
Yeah. It does like a funky transition. And you're like, what? Like when he gives her the knee, again, we're just gonna spoil this. When he gives her the sedative to kill her, I was like, what the hell is
Like the moment she cracks her neck, the movie changes completely for me. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what just happened?
you grab your neck, you're like, what's going on?
Yeah. And Hilary Swank does a great job in that movie. I'm pretty sure Hilary Swank was in a Karate Kid movie, by the way.
She was. There's Karate Kid part, or it's like the new Karate Kid or something.
Yeah, something like that. Really good film, but like that to me was like, I didn't need this. Who wanted this? Like it's a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. That movie, in my opinion, if that movie has a happy ending instead, that's probably 100%. Just saying. But I agree with you. On top of a speech, I don't need two of them, but I definitely personally need one montage scene. I need some sort of training montage. And I think in every sports movie, you need someone overcoming some sort of odd or some sort of obstacle. What was interesting about Warrior was that I don't necessarily think the obstacle for either brother was the sport itself, but it was more so overcoming the trauma of their past. And that was enough for me. Like those two were like dominant at their sports, And usually, the best sports movies have people who are like learning to be dominant at the sport or trying to ascend in the ranks. These two were already like amazing competitors. I was gonna say world class, but let's just call it Atlantic City class because that's where they were fighting, and I don't know how they would have fared against like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experts. But like that worked for me because it was like, all right, they're overcoming themselves. Cool. But I do need someone overcoming some sort of obstacle. So I would definitely agree with your underdog take. Have we ever seen a movie outside of Warrior where there was, maybe you have, where someone dominant was the main character and it was like, and it worked and they weren't like an underdog really? Because I can't remember any.
So are you saying like they don't ascend in their sport, but they have like a personal growth?
Yeah.
Usually those are like corny. It's like there's one I can't think of the name, but I know what you're trying to get at. Like they're so good at their sport, but it's like you're a dick and no one wants to be on your team, and you have to learn to be nicer. And then the whole movie's them being like more selfless or whatever.
Yes, yeah, that type of situation. Yeah, but I and yeah, again, those movies don't necessarily, we probably don't remember them because they're not that memorable, probably.
Like,
That's probably what's
Friday
going
Night
on.
Lights is a great one. It's one of my guilty pleasure shows of all time. It's just a ridiculous drama that goes off the rails. There becomes murder in it. It is just outrageous. But the movie's really good because it takes this team and like, have you ever seen it?
I have not.
Oh my God. I would recommend if you're on a sports movie kick and all those out there, it's really good. Billy Bob Thornton's the head coach and it's based on a true story, loosely based. There's a lot of details changed, but it doesn't matter. Cinema does a good job. It shows that like Texas football's a religion. And like, if you're a head coach and you do something wrong, they're coming for your head. You have to move. Like you have to uproot your family and go. And it does a good job of showing the various levels of this team where you have a star athlete who is a dick and how he needs to like kind of fix himself and the dramas he goes through. They have a player that could be good, but he has a drinking issue. And then they have a guy who's doesn't think too highly of himself, but he also has the ability, and how this coach has to kind of manage all these people. I think that sports film is unique because it does a good job of balancing so many elements of various sports films where you could have one movie based on that one character, but it has them as like a family and what they do and even their families within it. So if no one has seen that, including you, I highly recommend it. It really is a good watch.
Okay. I think a lot of people, their go-to for a sports movie archetype is Rocky 1, right? Where it's like a guy or gal or anything in between rising up the ranks from beginner to champion.
You're just going to start using the lyrics from Eye of the Tiger, right?
No.
I should have.
Talk about.
That was see. That's why I'm not a pro yet. That should have been that would have been the wave. It was right in front of me, like legitimately going from zero to hero. Only problem with that is sometimes it's not believable. In this movie, it happens. But what's great about this movie is he doesn't like become the best player in the NBA. He like barely makes a team. I guess. Well, did you like the way it went from he was going to get possibly drafted to he may have had to have made the summer league team instead? Did you like that route that it took where it wasn't like he became the number one overall pick, this all-time great story, whatever? Did you like that it was a different approach to that?
Yeah, because I was even like, what is going to happen? Like, is this guy realistically a number one pick? Like, I've studied enough sports, pay attention enough where I'm like, he's good, but there's no way he has the press and the percentage and like just because you make a viral video is not going to make you number one. That's pretty crazy. But I do like that he has to go through the circuits. And I was a little surprised when he, like the second, and I believe it's in the second game, he gets his chance again, and he almost hits Kermit, like for real. It was like a little late in the film. I was like, oh, we're gonna, like I thought he was gonna clench his fists and Sandler would kind of grab him, but no, like he screwed that up. Like he really did that. So I like that. Do you like that path? And did you like then? Because I'm a little bit indifferent with that final game. Did you like how they had him play one more time with Kermit, and then like last second they're like, get off the plane, we have one more game for you? Did you like that, or did you think it was like a little forced?
I think them being at the airport was a little forced. To me, it could have just been like, you could have had them just buying the tickets to get for the plane ride. You didn't have to do the whole running through the airport in a rom-com situation where he had to get him right before he got on the plane to go back to Spain. I think it would have been perfectly fine if it was a little bit more subtle. I personally liked that it wasn't as cut and dry as him at the draft showcase playing well enough to make the NBA. I like that he had to do, because there are those secret like underground workouts. Those happen. Those have been happening forever.
Oh, okay.
It's just that people don't really know about them. It's not, they don't talk about them. Once in a while, sometimes they do them in public gyms, and you get the video, and it's like, whoa. It's like, that's when you realize like professional athletes are genuinely made of different stuff than we are. Like, wow, seeing them amongst regular people is kind of nuts. But yeah, so I personally liked it. And did you enjoy that they wound up on different teams?
I loved it. I thought that was great. I'm so happy that he was on the Celtics. That Hernan Gomez was on the Celtics, and they were dapping each other up. And then I love that Sandler gave away his like move at the end, like, this is how we're gonna beat him. But now it's like they have that friendly rivalry where they're gonna work with each other, forever. I think that was a smart move. One like thing though that now I think about it, and when I was watching the movie, like, and I guess there wouldn't be a movie if they didn't do it, but like, there have been athletes that have done worse and have like had worse histories, but still have been able to profit and do things. Couldn't he have just like talked about the issue with like one GM? Like, his story, I clearly understand why he doesn't talk about it and why they do it in the car and how it's emotional and it hits. Like, I get that. But I think in the real world, like, if I was him and I was Adam Sandler, and you were my Adam Sandler and I was the guy, I would hope you'd be like, let's go tell your story one time. Let's get it all out there. Let the media then decide when they have all the information. Because I felt like they just operated on rumors and they were like, this man's a murderer. And it's like, no, one person has asked him, and Sandler even says, like, nobody lets him tell the story. I was like, you don't let him tell the story. And no one has ever brought this up. Am I overthinking it, or is this just a big nitpick here? Does any of that make sense? Is that fair?
So I definitely agree with you. I think the only thing that you can say to make that make sense is that he's not like a pedigree guy, where I think specifically in the case of like a draft prospect, if you were someone who was like the number one ranked player in high school and you had something like that happen and you were projected to be a top pick, then you definitely would only have to like tell your story to the media or whatever. But I think in the case in the film, you can make the case that like he's a foreign guy. People don't really know much about him, so they're just going to believe the hearsay. You could make that argument, but I definitely agree with you that he would just have to talk about it and it would make more sense. That was one of those things where it's like, yeah, this was probably avoidable, but movie magic type beat. But also, I wonder if you could make the case that, like, well, a billionaire said that the guy was violent, so we're going to believe the billionaire in the Sixers owner. Maybe that could have been the reason why.
Fair point. Very fair point.
Otherwise, and by the way, Ben Foster as that owner, what an incredibly unlikable billionaire, right?
Ben Foster's one of those actors, like, you see him again. If you've ever listened to the rewatchables, he's one of those quote unquote that guys. To me, he's a very good character actor. You don't realize how much stuff he's in until you're like, wow, he's in all of these movies. He can be real charming, real piece of shit. He does a real good job being a dick in this movie.
Yeah. Was there anything in this movie that just didn't work for you at all?
Honestly, like, I thought about it. The two montages made me laugh more than like not work. Like I just said before, the Queen Latifah marriage, like, I kind of wish they were just friends.
Did you notice that they didn't kiss one time in the movie?
They didn't, right? It was all cheeks. It was weird. It was like they were dapping each other up.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they gave him a family, but I kind of wish they explored that a little more. Like, I wish his daughter like awkwardly brought up how he's like not home, and I guess as a teenager, like, maybe that's her addressing it, like she's just uncomfortable talking about it. I didn't have anything like I hated off the top of my head. Did you have anything you really didn't like?
No, not really. I mean,
Surprised that I didn't have anything like.
Yeah, the only thing I could say maybe didn't work for me as well as they wanted it to was when Bo like completely blew up his big chance. I mean, like, went almost went nuclear. Like him almost punching the guy in the face as he's on the floor. That was one of those. This maybe should have worked for me a little bit more than it did, but it also didn't take me out of the movie. It was just kind of like on the line for me. I mean, overall, I just thought this was like a really solid, like a solid movie. I just, in terms of streaming though, I don't know if I would have watched this movie if it was in theaters. I'll be honest.
No, I told you I would. I would have needed to hear, like, I really would have needed to hear my sources say, "Go watch this movie."
I think that this is one movie that will have benefited from the streaming wave that we are on, which Ben Affleck has talked about. The Way Back, was that in theaters?
It was right when the pandemic hit. It was one of the first movies to go like VOD because and I think that kind of affected like the Oscar push and buzz because he was really good in the movie. I don't believe he was nominated for it, but a lot of people say part of the reason was because COVID hit, it went to streaming. It was like right when COVID started, and it kind of messed all that up.
Okay.
I would agree with your point that this is like a really good streaming. I think this is a great film for streaming. And I kind of hope that streamers, which they won't, and they will not listen to me because I know nothing, but like just make better films. you don't have to pump out like tons of crap. Like, I just want to, like, Netflix is probably the worst for this. They have so much stuff, and I still have so much stuff in my queue of like possibly I'll watch this. But then once in a while I'll get a gem, and I was like, I'd rather just skip out all the stuff I was waiting to watch and just watch this hustle movie. Or like now we have the Spiderhead movie that came out that looks very enticing. I might actually watch that today. But it's like Netflix, you're operating in the red all the time. Like you're losing money left and right. And you say you're going to be more selective projects, so do it. It's okay. Like I think everybody would agree we'd rather just get better quality projects. I don't need a new movie every single week because I'm not going to watch the previous one that came out. And I personally think it's a lot of algorithm stuff where it's like the show Barry, which if nobody's watched it, I'm not going to spoil anything. Phenomenal show. One of my favorite shows on any streaming television platform. Can't recommend it enough. But they have a huge joke about the algorithm. And they're like, well, we've tested our audience. And they say that if you have dessert at this time and you're thinking about this for dinner, you're going to finish this whole show. And as crazy as that sounds, Bill Hader had an interview with Sean Fennessy talking about the episode. He's like, no, that's true. They will find these algorithms. They will put three things together and then make a show. And most of the time it's very incoherent. It does not make any sense. But because the algorithm says it'll work, they will put money towards that. And then when it fails, they just go back to the algorithm. So that's when you kind of lose some originality because it's like, well, that's a cool idea, but what is it like? What is it similar to? What two things can we compare and sell to people?
We are in a fascinating time for film. And I'm kind of excited to see where we go and also kind of scared. It's just an interesting place to be at. But before we head out of here, I wanted to know, because I've made this point many, many times over the years, I'm sure on certain content that I've made this point as well. I love it when comedians get into dramatic acting. I've said it about Pete Davidson recently, and he would be someone who I would recommend in this category. Is there any comedian or comedic actor who maybe hasn't yet that you would like to dip their toe into dramatic acting?
I've already used him before in our rom-com pod, but I'm going to go Tom Segura again. I don't know if he's made a movie. I really don't. I think he has a great demeanor to have like a Judd Apatow type of film centered on him, where it's got moments, it's funny, but there's still a story. Someone's growing, there's a problem, whatever. But I think he'd do a great job because my second choice would be Bill Hader, but he's already doing the show Barry, which is a dark comedy, and he gets to do it all. And he's been in some dramas. He's very good. He's honestly one of my favorites right now. But I think Tom would just crush it. I think his dry delivery, with just like his resistance to show emotion would be really powerful in certain scenes where he has to like break down or try to explain something to someone. So that's my pick.
I would love to see some Eddie Murphy action in there. I'd like to see him, to see if he could do it, because at one point he must have been, at least in the '80s, the number one comedian in the world at a certain point. So I want to see him do it, because I mean, Robin Williams kind of laid out the blueprint for this, in my opinion. I think he's the all-timer in terms of comedian turned actor. He kind of showed people like, oh wait, no, these funny guys can do the real weighty stuff too. Jim Carrey has done a pretty good job at this, although he just retired seemingly.
Oh yeah, he's just going through phases. But Lewis Black just popped into my head too. I think he'd be really good.
You know what? That's a good shout out. Yeah. Do you think Will Ferrell could do it?
He's made like semi-serious. It's just personally hard for me to see him like in a very serious role. He's done it. He did this one dark comedy where somebody's like narrating his life. The title of the film escapes me right now. He's good in it. It's just for me personally, I'm so used to him in Step Brothers. It's like, this is hard. But counterpoint, John C. Reilly does a good job of balancing comedic roles and dramatic roles. He's phenomenal in The Lakers Show as Dr. Buss. He's really good. Again, if you haven't seen that, if anybody listening hasn't seen it, phenomenal show. But he does a very good job of getting lost in the character. Like, he eats it up. And you would think he's overdoing it, but he balances the theatrics with the drama and everything. It's really well done.
I wouldn't mind seeing Kevin Hart try out a little bit. The thing with him
Like
is, see, the thing with The Rock, I've always said that I want to see him do more stuff, but they're actually really interesting parallels. They are both such interesting physical specimen that it kind of boxes them in a little bit, right?
Too big and one is too small.
Yeah, and Kevin Hart is a short guy who's brawlic too, so it's like, I could see you in an action movie. I just don't necessarily see you being like a downtrodden father. You know what I mean? Yeah, I want to see a bunch of guys. I just think that there's a capacity for it, and I think one of there's two things at play here. I think that as a comedian, you know, you're probably struggling for so long and trying to rise up the ranks that a lot of times it's like, let me get my money while I can, while I'm hot and while I'm on a run. Because sometimes with these comedians, they go on a run and then that's kind of it. Like, Amy Schumer was like the hot name for a while, and now a lot of people in the general public don't want to see her and stuff anymore. And that just happens. That just happens to some of these guys. So I'm sure a lot of them are like, let me get my money in while I can, and then maybe I'll see some stuff. Like, Bill Murray was a guy who kind of came up in the golden age of comedic content and was able to like find a really good balance in both. I would say, at least, right?
Yeah, and then he took his persona of like the living meme, and now he's just like forever in the ethos.
Yeah, and I think we're in like a bit of a transitional period with even comedic performances, because now it's kind of like, what is a comedian? What type of movie should comedians make? Should comedians go for streaming movies? Should comedians try to make stuff that's going to go to the theater? Should they do indie movies? It's overall, it's an interesting time in entertainment, and I think we're both just kind of looking for good content, right? And in terms of good content, I personally would say that Hustle is one of them. I know that you agree with that. Do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'd say just give it a shot. If you got an hour 45, hour 52 at your house doing nothing, check it out. It's definitely worth your time.
Absolutely. And people heard some music at the beginning of this podcast. Where can people find that, brother?
Yeah, it's at Above the Moon Music on Instagram, Above the Moon on Spotify, Apple Music. We're finally we're starting to finish up some recordings for our big LP. Hopefully
Nice.
coming out before 2023, which would be great. But keep you updated as that goes. And if you want to challenge any of my takes, it's at KG4346.
Does the EP have a name yet, or is that still in the works?
Works. We are still recording some of those final songs, but once it has a name, I will tease that out.
Oh, awesome. And you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/geeksweekly, and you can find me on Instagram at BuffCharmanderGW. I'd like to thank you very much for listening to this month's edition of the Sweaty Dive podcast, especially if you made it this far. We appreciate it so much. Next month, we will be back talking the MCU again with a little bit of Thor, Love and Thunder. Once again, I've been Buff Charmander, joined as always by my co-host KG.
Until next time.
Stay safe and stay sweaty, my friends.